The first sign something was wrong wasn't dramatic at all. No thunder, no screaming neighbors, no movie moment where the sky splits open. It was just a puddle. A quiet, stubborn puddle sitting behind my shed under a clean blue sky like it owned the place. And that's what made it unsettling. Water doesn't just sit still unless something is blocking it. My name's Owen Carter. I'm 57 years old, retired from the Army Corps of Engineers, and for the last 5 years I've been living in my father's old home in a neighborhood called Briarstone Heights. The kind of place where lawns are trimmed like carpets and people smile at you like they're measuring your property value. I didn't move here for the neighbors. I moved here because this land was my father's. Modest one-story ranch house, half an acre of slope, old oak trees, and running behind it all, a narrow stone-lined drainage channel that had been there longer than the neighborhood itself. My dad used to call it the vein. He said, "If you block it, the land will punish you." At the time I thought he was being poetic. Turns out he was being accurate. I walked out back that morning and followed the puddle to the edge of the channel, expecting to find leaves or debris, maybe a stray branch. Instead, I froze. There was a new fence. Cheap wood planks, uneven, freshly hammered in, cutting straight across the drainage channel like somebody had decided gravity wasn't allowed anymore. The channel was literally dammed, and the water was pooling fast. I traced the fence line until I saw the little sign stuck into a flower bed like it was a trophy. HOA Beautification Project. Do not disturb. I didn't need to guess who did it. Her name was Heather Langley. She was the president of the Briarstone HOA for 3 terms, former real estate agent, self-appointed guardian of community standards, and the kind of woman who wore white tennis outfits like armor. Heather lived right behind me, her yard pressed up against mine like 2 competing worlds. Her backyard looked like a magazine cover. Mine looked like real life. And Heather didn't like real life. She'd made comments before, little polished insults wrapped in fake friendliness. "Owen, you know, some people prefer a more refined look. You'd be amazed what a little landscaping can do for perception." I always smiled, nodded, went back to my coffee. But this wasn't landscaping. This was sabotage. That channel wasn't decoration. It was storm runoff infrastructure, documented and protected, cutting through a shared easement between our lots. And she blocked it for a flower bed. I tried to be civil. I did what a normal person does when a neighbor does something dumb. I went to talk to them. I knocked on Heather's door. She opened it halfway, like I might be contagious. "Oh, Owen," she said, smiling with her teeth but not her eyes. "What can I do for you?" I kept my voice calm. "The new fencing behind our properties is blocking the drainage channel. Water's already backing up into my yard." Her smile tightened. "That trench is unsightly. We're improving the community." "That trench exists to prevent flooding," I said. "It's not optional." She laughed softly like I'd told her a funny joke. "If your yard is pooling, maybe you should invest in better grading." I felt something twist in my chest, that familiar feeling from my military days, the one you get when someone is confidently wrong and absolutely unwilling to learn. "Heather, it's a protected runoff path. It's been here since the 80s. She shrugged. "If you have concerns, submit them to the board. We'll review them." And then she shut the door. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be solved by a polite conversation. Because people like Heather don't respond to logic, they respond to power. And she thought she had it. A few days later, the HOA didn't send me an explanation. They sent me a fine. A white envelope taped to my door. Violation notice. They claimed the drainage channel was an unapproved excavation, and I was responsible for hazardous terrain management. $200. Due in 7 days. I reread it 3 times like my brain refused to accept the stupidity. They were fining me for a drainage channel that existed before the HOA was even formed. And the reason it was flooding was because they blocked it. I didn't pay, so they escalated. Another notice. Then another. Then they started taking photos of my yard like I was a criminal. One day I caught a guy in a polo shirt peering over my fence with a clipboard. He claimed he was checking for invasive vines. Sure, I knew harassment when I saw it. Heather didn't just want me to comply. She wanted me embarrassed, silenced, forced to submit. Meanwhile, it started raining lightly. Not a storm yet, just enough to remind me that the soil was already saturated. The water crept closer to my crawlspace vents. I stood there watching it like I was watching a fuse burn toward explosives. I could feel my father's voice in my head. The land always speaks first. So I listened. And I prepared. I drove to the county records office and pulled every document I could. Original plats, permits, drainage compliance letters, maps, everything. When you've spent your life building infrastructure, you learn something important. Water is predictable. People are not. But paper is honest. That week I attended the HOA meeting for the first time in over a year. The Briarstone clubhouse looked like a country club. Fake marble columns, chandelier, free lemonade, and residents arguing about mailbox colors like it mattered. Heather sat at the center of the board table like a queen on a throne. When she saw me walk in with my folder, she smiled like she was about to enjoy herself. "Mr. Carter," she said, "we weren't sure you'd attend." I sat quietly until the homeowner concerns segment. Then I stood, walked up, and opened my folder. The drainage channel behind my property is legally documented and protected. Your new project blocked it. Water is backing up, damaging my foundation. I slid copies of permits across the table. Heather didn't even look. She folded her hands and said, "Thank you, Owen. The HOA's beautification efforts fall within our rights." I held up a stamped county letter. "This is from the civil engineering office." She smiled. "We can't verify the authenticity of independently produced documents during open forum." Independently produced. Like I forged county archives in my garage. People in the room murmured. One guy whispered, "He's always complaining." Another said, "He should have just joined the landscaping plan." Heather tilted her head and said, "No other residents have reported flooding. Perhaps the issue is isolated to your property due to insufficient maintenance." That was the moment I stopped being polite. I closed my folder slowly, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "If this neighborhood floods, it won't be because of rain. It'll be because you blocked the only path water had to escape." Heather laughed. "Next item, clubhouse renovation budget." And just like that, my warning vanished into HOA nonsense. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking the channel, measuring soil saturation, watching clouds stack up on the horizon. Then the weather alerts started blowing up. A tropical system had shifted inland faster than expected. Flash flood warnings. Historic rainfall projections. The kind of storm they talk about every decade, but only hits once in a generation. The forecast was brutal. Heather still didn't back down. She doubled down. A cease and desist notice showed up on my porch accusing me of interfering with community landscaping operations. They demanded I stop modifying stormwater flow or face legal action. I laughed out loud when I read it. Because here's the thing. I wasn't modifying anything. I was restoring it. The only people modifying stormwater flow were them. So I did what engineers do when they're surrounded by idiots. I built redundancy. Sandbags. Reinforcement slats. Temporary floodgate. I cleared the channel, strengthened its walls, and reopened the original runoff line through the easement. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't HOA approved. But it was correct. A friend of mine, Marcus, a former city inspector, came by and took one look at Heather's fence and said, "This is going to collapse." I nodded. "I know." He pointed at her freshly planted flower bed. "And when it does, the water will cut sideways. It'll hit the lowest basin, right where your precious clubhouse sits." And sure enough, the storm came. Around midnight, rain started gentle. By 2 a.m., it sounded like the sky was dumping buckets onto the roof. Thunder didn't roll. It cracked. At 2:17 a.m., my floodgate opened, and the channel took the surge exactly like it was designed to. The water poured through, funneled downhill, discharged into the natural basin. It worked. But across the fence, Heather's yard turned into a bathtub. Her fence became a dam. Her flower bed sank like wet cardboard. I heard metal snap, probably an irrigation line. By 3 a.m., water was knee-high in her yard. By dawn, half the neighborhood looked like a swamp. And the clubhouse, the shiny HOA jewel on the low ground, was underwater. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just stood there in the quiet aftermath with mud on my boots, watching the inevitable happen. At 7 in the morning, someone knocked on my door. I opened it, and there she was. Heather Langley. Soaked, hair plastered to her face, makeup streaked like she'd been crying in the rain. No sun hat. No tennis outfit. Just a broken person. "Your channel," she whispered. "It's still open?" I nodded. "We need it," she said. "The water's going toward the clubhouse foundation." Her voice cracked. I didn't know it could happen this fast. I stared at her for a long moment and said, "I tried to tell you." Heather looked like she wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because the water had already won the argument. Later that morning, county engineers showed up. They walked through ankle-deep floodwater, took one look at my yard and said, "Your lot's the only one with functional runoff." They asked me to walk them through what happened. I gave them everything. Photos, emails, permits, certified letters, my full report. The lead inspector looked at Heather's collapsed fence and said, "Who authorized this?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because the documents did. Within days, the HOA was under investigation for unauthorized drainage modification, negligence, and failure to file environmental assessments. Insurance companies started denying claims, then turning around and coming after the HOA. The neighborhood shifted overnight. The people who avoided me started knocking on my door. "Can we add our name to the complaint? Can you help us document damage? We didn't realize you were right." Heather resigned within a week. Quietly. No speech. No newsletter announcement. Just gone. And the craziest part? Some residents still defended her. It was an unprecedented storm, they said. Nobody could predict that. Which is funny, because engineers predict that kind of storm all the time. That's literally the point of infrastructure. 2 months later, the city officially declared the drainage channel behind my property a protected historic runoff path, exempt from HOA interference. The HOA was forced into a third-party audit. New leadership took over. And suddenly, the neighborhood that treated me like a nuisance started treating me like a necessity. But here's where it gets complicated, because I didn't feel victorious. Not really. The clubhouse was ruined. Homes were damaged. Families were displaced. People lost thousands. And yes, Heather did it to herself. But part of me still wondered, how many times do people like her win before they finally lose? How many times do communities let power-hungry leaders bully the quiet guy until nature forces them to admit the truth? And here's the part that still gets me. Even after everything, even after she resigned, even after the subpoenas and lawsuits, some of her loyalists still glare at me like I'm the villain. Like I caused the flood by refusing to submit. Like the real crime was standing up. And honestly, that might be the most unsettling lesson of all. Because sometimes, people would rather drown than admit they were wrong. So let me ask you something. If you were in my shoes, would you have fought back? Or would you have paid the fines, kept your head down, and let your house flood just to avoid conflict? And what about Heather? Do you think she deserved what happened? Or do you think the storm was punishment enough? Drop your take in the comments because I guarantee people are going to disagree on this one. And if you've ever lived under an HOA or dealt with someone who thought rules mattered more than reality, you already know how ugly that power can get. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Because sometimes the quiet guy isn't weak. He's just waiting for the moment the world finally listens.